There are a ton of heroes to play in Flesh and Blood, each with their own level of difficulty. Some are simple and straightforward, while others are more complex and nuanced. But among them all, I wanted to try my hand at the hardest hero to play. In this video, I'm going to try and build a semi-competitive budget deck, then take it to my armory to see how well I can do. This is my journey with the only 5-star difficulty hero currently in Classic constructed, Oscilio Constella Intelligence. There were two things that I knew about Oscilio when starting this challenge. One, he was a combo deck that abused Gone in a Flash, and two, he was actually reasonably cheap as far as fully tuned Flesh and Blood decks go. But there was just one teeny tiny issue with doing this. I'd never played the deck before, so while I had a vague idea that he played sigils and wanted to combo off with Gone in a Flash, I had no idea how to actually do it, or even what the rest of the deck looked like. Thankfully, there is a wonderful little website called fabrary.net, and with it I was able to take a look at other people's Oscilio lists to get a general idea for how tuned builds were constructed. I don't understand anything. While looking at the tuned list, I could immediately tell that Oscilio was an aggressive combo deck with the aforementioned Gone in a Flash as the key card. The ability to return it to your hand and attack with it over and over is a wee bit busted, so no matter the price, I knew that this was going to have to stay. I was also fairly certain that Sigil of Brilliance was a key card because, well, I mean, it's his specialization and it says draw card. Like, I'm no expert, but I think drawing cards is usually pretty good. As for the legendaries and the rest of the Majestics, I had no clue what was and wasn't necessary for making the deck work. This meant that I was going to have to take these tuned lists and work slowly backwards. For now, I could only make a couple minor cuts before testing, like taking out Tunic and Mind Warp, as well as swapping Current Funnel with High Voltage as another blue lightning card. This 1.0 build was about $260, which was honestly not that bad considering I didn't cut a lot, but I decided that my goal was to get the deck down to about 150. But before I could start making any more swaps, I needed to have a better understanding of the deck, which meant my favorite part of building any new deck, sleeving it up and doing some good old-fashioned gold fishing. And let me tell you, gold fishing was actually super important this time. Oscilio is all about sequencing, so playing out your hands by yourself is incredibly helpful. While it's obviously not as good as playing games, it did help me to start figuring out the puzzle of each hand, as I could just rewind things if I messed up. In fact, I gold fished a lot during this entire challenge across all the different builds. It's just a super easy thing to do while sitting at my desk after working on videos. Or, while I'm supposed to be working on videos. However, as great as gold fishing is, I needed to get actual games as well. So later that same day, I took my Codex journal, which you can get for 10% off using the link below or code Sloopdoop at checkout, and headed out to the coffee shop with a good friend of mine to play a few practice games, where I got my ass handed to me on a silver platter. This deck is hard, man. I was still really struggling with the sequencing of the sigils and making embodiments for the go again, although I was starting to pick up on a couple little things that felt clunky, like burn bears. And so even though I still had very little idea of what I was doing, I quickly decided that in order to make things just a little easier for myself, I would lean a tiny bit more into the big brain strategy that I actually did understand. 0 for 4s with go again. I mean, it worked for Aurora before she speed ran Living Legend, so surely it would work here, right? After watching a few deck techs to get an idea of why certain cards were run, I was able to make a few more changes to the deck to cut a bit more of the price. The first big cut was Lightning Greaves. While this is a huge combo enabler, Snapdragon Scalers is basically the same thing, just in mini form, and they cost $30 less. They won't allow for as big of a combo turn, but they'd still work just fine. As for the main deck, well, I mentioned Burn Bear as it seems to be just a sideboard card, and so that's where I put it for now, replacing it with the yellow Etchings of Arcana. This would also serve as a replacement to the Mind Warps I'd already taken out, as both were 2-damage arcane spells that had relevant effects. While Etchings doesn't disrupt the opponent, they do get us back our sigils, so they still serve a good purpose in the deck, but you will be a bit more weak into aggressive decks. I also opted to take out Lightning Press, as a lot of decks seem to have it in the sideboard as well, and instead put in Entwined Lightnings to pair with the Flittering Charges and Fries as my natural go-again attacks. This would, in theory, allow me to be a bit more aggressive with the deck, and I for one am a big fan of Entwined Lightning paired with Electromagnetic Somersault. Oh, and I also swapped out the blue Blast to Oblivions for the yellows. I don't know why I was playing the blues over the yellows in the original build, I'm just dumb sometimes. I now had this nice, shiny 1.1 version of the deck, at least the main board. Because I was still learning the ins and outs of the hero, I was very unconcerned with the sideboard. I mean, how can I plan for certain matchups if I don't fully even know what the deck itself wants to do? But with this main board done and, well, sinks in the sideboard, I just needed to take some time to test Oscilio out and learn the playlines. But I mean, come on. I should only need a few more games. It can't be that hard, right?
That is not correct.
Yeah, so this is where I legitimately almost gave up. See, normally when I play a new deck, it takes me just a couple games to get a decent idea of what the hero is doing, and I'm able to fall back on my overall knowledge of the game to do pretty well, but not with Oscilio. Game after game after game, I just kept getting my ass kicked. I was playing super aggressively, trying to race because isn't that what I'm supposed to do? And I mean, yeah, I was still messing up on my sequencing with the Blast to Oblivions and bouncing sigils, but considering it was just a friend and I, he was letting me take things back, and yet I still couldn't win. Every game, I kept finding that I just couldn't get him low enough before I had to start blocking, and then it was game over from there. Oscilio is very frail, and I was getting really frustrated trying to play him. Like, I'm being so serious when I say that I hated this deck for the first little while. I knew he was a challenging hero to play, but I didn't think it would be this hard, and I mean, I didn't even cut everything yet. How the hell was I supposed to make this even cheaper if I couldn't even win with this build? I was not having a good time with this hero, and I genuinely was considering just picking a different deck to build. But then I came across a video by a very skilled Oscilio player, and right at the beginning, he said something that changed everything and quite literally saved this challenge.
Basic fundamentals on Oscilio. In my opinion, Oscilio is a pure tempo deck, not an aggro deck, not a combo deck, but it's an aggro-ish deck, which of course wants to combo, but you're not like Kano or Storm deck where you just fully want to tunnel in the combo because that will lead to a lot of issues.
It's a tempo deck? That's what I was doing wrong? I've just been trying to race and hope to get into some nutty combo, but I'm supposed to be blocking?
This is like one of my favorite types of hand. Looks a little big at first, but deal here is blocking 3, blocking 3, blocking 3, okay? Block 9, send 4, play Solace, heal 3, get gun back, Arsenal gun flash for next turn. We just did 17 value. Those type of value hands are exceptionally good. And remember the important part? Blocking, blocking, blocking.
Yuuto, you beautiful son of a bitch! I cannot stress just how important having an idea of how to approach your games is with any hero, let alone one this difficult. You can have the most powerful deck in the game, but unless you know what the playstyle and strategy is, you're not going to be able to pilot it well. And if you're playing it totally wrong, like going full aggro with a deck that apparently doesn't want to go full aggro, you'll just feel like you're beating your head against the wall. I cannot express just how much better this deck felt to play immediately after watching Yuuto's video. Man, if only I could get him on a Discord call to get advice from him directly, that would be so helpful.
This is foreshadowing.
Anyways, with this advice in mind, I actually started to win some games. Hell yes! Turns out, sometimes it's better to conserve life rather than trying to race. Who knew? By taking some turns off, it gave me the space to keep good hands that could actually take advantage of a Gone and a Flash and Arsenal, giving me those 16 to 20 plus damage turns if sequenced right. But that's not even all of it. The most important thing I learned during this period of testing was that I had completely overlooked the arcane aspect of the deck to a criminal degree. See, I had thought that the arcane spells were mostly there for the combo turns. In fact, when I was looking at Null Shock and Consigned to Cosmos, I didn't think they were very good at all because, like, wow, banishing cards in grave and countering instants? Great!
Well, actually, idiot, they are great. But don't let our stupid asses tell you that. How about we turn you over to our good friend, Professor Ribbits?
Oh, they're multiplying? Oh, and I thought one of them was annoying enough already. Anyways, hello class and welcome back. For today's lesson, I'd like to talk about one of the strongest cards in Oscilio's kit, Volzar the Shocky Stick. This delightful little weapon is actually an integral part of Oscilio's ability to actually kill opponents. First, if you have a sigil on board, it costs 1 less to activate. This works really well for a deck that almost never wants to pitch, and unless you're facing an arcane opponent, Sigil of Conductivity is a key card in making Volzar cost $3.99 for the whole game. But what's better than getting a 5-finger discount on your weapon? Ass blasting your opponent from orbit with more arcane than they can shake a shocky stick at. For each lightning card you play in a turn, Volzar lets you amp that much. On moderate turns, you can usually play a couple of attacks in an instant, letting you follow up with around 2 to 4 amped arcane. But on those big combo turns, you can get upwards of 7 or 8 amp, closing out games with no way for your opponent to block it all. So those shocks that absolute stupid moron Sloopdoop overlooked, no one cares about the left side, it's just the fact that they can come in for 4+ damage at the end of your turns at instant speed. So even if you only do a moderate turn ending in, let's say, a Gone and a Flash, you can zap your opponents for some Arcane and bounce back the attack for your arsenal. Very fair, very balanced. Anyways, that'll be it for this lesson on Volzar the Shocky Stick. I hope you found this informative, and if you didn't, fuck you! Now that I've been playing him for a few weeks, I felt like I was finally beginning to properly understand Oscilio. While tracking action points and resources are key in any deck, it feels even more crucial in this deck due to how difficult hands can be to piece together. Action points are the most important part, especially considering that you can bounce sigils to get embodiments. If you sequence it right, you can extend your chain by an attack or two. Do it wrong, and your turn can end abruptly. Providing you actually catch it.
This is also foreshadowing.
Knowing how many times you can go again in a turn is crucial because this is partly how you can determine what cards to block with. For example, if you won't have go again on your last attack, then it's probably better to block with something like Etchings of Arcana since you won't be able to use it. Being able to puzzle out how many things you can do with any given hand, especially with Gone in a Flash, is very important. But it's also important to check how many resources you can use. Most cards in the deck cost 0, but the few cards that cost 1 or 2 are only useful when you can actually play them. If you've got 3 reds and a Comet Storm or Null Shock, then either blocking or cycling to Oscilio is oftentimes a better idea than keeping them in hand. This deck is one that either wants to trade good value by blocking 6 and sending 7, or you want to have massive go-off turns with 16 to 24+ damage. Once you start to identify which is best to do with the hands you draw, you'll start to improve with this hero exponentially. And with my own understanding of the deck growing, I decided that I would bring it in its current form to an Armory to see how well I could do. It's also good practice, because, where's the harm? If I lose, it's not like this is the final challenge, and if I win, well, come on, that's probably not going to happen.
1 Armory later.
So I went 2-1, I beat a Gravy and a Dio, and only lost to Bolton. And I was not expecting to do that well this early. The deck was starting to feel really good, although I can't discount how much it helps when your opponents also don't know what your deck is even doing. But still, 2-1 ain't bad. However, I still couldn't end the challenge here. See, while $230 is cheap by Fab standard, I wanted to try and make the deck cost no more than $150, which meant more cuts. Also, I was using this microphone arm and my phone to film my games, and well, take a look at the footage and see if you can spot the problem. So this left me with 3 things to do. Cut the price of the deck, make an actual sideboard that's not just, well, this, and get a proper camera mount. At this point in the process, I put in about 20 games in the course of a month, and I could finally say that I had an okay-ish idea of what I could cut. I had already removed the ether bindings for the Armory I went to, as I had watched Matthew Wren's combo off at the Kansas City Calling without them. That cut $15 more from the deck, and I instead played the Blade Beckoner Gauntlets for more block, which is actually super helpful considering how frail Oscilio is. The next major cut was Channel Lightning Valley so that I could put Null Shocks in the main board now that I understood how valuable they were. CLV was a card that I absolutely adored in Aurora, but in Oscilio, it wasn't quite as good. Don't get me wrong, the card is still super powerful, but unlike Aurora with her ability and weapon, Oscilio doesn't have any good pitch outlets. Sure, Volzar could be one, unless you have a sigil on board. And considering we run a sigil whose whole purpose is to sit on board, I kept finding that I'd play the CLV, draw my 1 card, and then it would just leave the field. And removing them let me cut about $45 or so from the deck. Moving to the sideboard, I was able to cut more of the deck's cost by removing the Burn Bears entirely. To replace them, I added Blanches for Prism and Gravy, then I put Lightning Presses for aggressive matchups that I need to race, Calming Breeze for Syndra and Mario, Fate for Scenes for Warriors and Assassins in general, and then a second Null Room piece. Now with all these changes, I was able to cut the price from about $230 all the way down to just $160. And honestly, I was tempted to just stop here because $10 over target isn't that big of a deal. Mind you, I was looking at Eclectic Magnetisms as a potential cut, but I wasn't really sure what to replace it with. While costing 1 is hefty, the card swings for 5 and blocks 3 and lets you play your Etchings of Arcana at instant speed, making them a bit smoother to play in the deck as you don't need go again. But for now, I wanted to do just a bit more testing before I decided whether or not I was going to cut them.
1 week later.
After several more games with this 1.2 build, I have to say that it's performing quite well. I do think I'm gonna cut the Eclectics for something just to make the deck hit my budget target, but there's one other card I want to discuss, a card that I've held my tongue on so far. See, in the very first build, I had cut current funnels for high voltage. I figured, hey, it's a blue lightning card that can amp 1. It should be fine, right? I hate this card. Every time I drew it, I just wished it was anything else. In fact, I hate it so much that I wrote a poem about it. I call it an ode to high voltage. Roses are red, and I wish I were dead, because high voltage sucks oh so fucking much. I've never before been simply abhorred by a card pitching blue, but who could have knew that this instant amp 1 would be so unfun? I cannot believe it was ever conceived and put into print. I mean, holy shit, I hate it so much. This card fucking sucks. I'll be taking it out, of that there's no doubt, but to LSS, I am not impressed that this card exists. I mean, what a miss. It's simply absurd. This card is a turd, a waste of a slot, pure majestic slop. So now you all know, in the bulk bin it goes, to high voltage I say, eat shit and good day. So I'm not the biggest fan of high voltage. Maybe it's decent in other builds, but I always hated seeing it in my hand. The issue with this card is it just wasn't doing enough to warrant the downsides. You'd think that amping 2 thanks to Volzar would be good, but the amount of times I was drawing it and didn't have any arcane was just too often, and it not blocking at all was a huge liability for a card that's only sometimes just okay. Sure, you can cycle it, but there are better options for this slot, even just a 3 block. So it was time to make yet another small tweak to the deck. There were only 2 changes from the 1.2 build to the 1.3 build. Eclectic Magnetism and High Voltage out, and Lightning Surge and Blue Heaven's Claw in. I think it's pretty obvious that Heaven's Claw is just a blue Lightning block 3 that can attack in a pinch, but the Lightning Surges were way more iffy, and that's why I had taken so long to remove the Eclectics. See, Lightning Surge isn't a bad card in decks like Aurora, but in Oscilio it has a couple issues. 1. Oscilio doesn't make embodiment of lightning tokens as reliably as Aurora had, since she could make it with her ability. That meant that Lightning Surge was almost always going to have to go in the arsenal in this deck. Which brings us to problem 2. It fights for the arsenal slot with Gone in a Flash. You know, the most important card in the deck. And this was immediately a problem when I tried playing the deck. The Heaven's Claws were fine, I mean it's a blue block 3, but I kept finding the surges were super clunky. On top of that, I was actually finding the deck as a whole suddenly felt just a tiny bit off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Sure, cutting the Eclectic Magnetisms allowed me to get the deck to about 140 bucks, so I hit my price target, but suddenly it was all feeling a little worse and I just couldn't figure out exactly why. So you know what? Screw it. I've done a bunch of budget decks and a couple of these Armory challenges all on my own, but this time I was tackling the most difficult hero in Classic Constructed, a deck I only just started playing for this challenge, and I wanted to make sure that the deck was as good as it possibly could be, so I figured that it was time to call a friend.
Hello?
Oh, shit, sorry, wrong person. Yuuto is determined to be the best Oscilio player in the world, and he very well might be. And considering how his video helped me with figuring out how to even play this deck, well, maybe he could even save this budget version. I was trying to lean more towards the, you know, kind of Aurora, like 4 go against stuff, but with like the Oscilio package of the shocks and the sigils. But you had mentioned Sigil of Ether as well as more Blast to Oblivion. So like, what's your idea around like that style of a deck?
So well, Blast to Oblivion is kind of like both. It's very combo-y card, but it's also like very mid-range-y card. It's a card that creates your embodiments consistently. Blast helps with that a lot, because then you make your first embodiment, and then they start making like more embodiments, and the train kind of like keeps going, and the deck flows. And Sigil of Aether is just, you need attacks that like start to drive your turn, and then you need finishers, arcane spells, and then you want like more sigils, because the turns where you don't draw sigils, like the first 3 turns, is like night and day difference. The math with Aether is pretty good, because it's like almost like 0 for 3 blue. If opponent pitches, they give a card. If they don't, you get like 3 amp, 1 damage, and then the free balls are. it's like a lot of implied value in that sense.
Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. I had considered Blue Blast to Oblivions, but it felt a bit clunky with only 9 sigils, and I had completely overlooked Sigil of Ether. Honestly, I considered it to work a bit like High Voltage, but worse as it's not a lightning card, but Yuuto mentioning that it can either amp your arcane, or it can get your opponents to give you a card even when you don't actually have an arcane spell in hand. I mean, that changes everything. But we did agree that 3 Blast to Oblivion blues and 3 Sigil of Ethers would be too much, and this would leave me with 2 extra slots in the deck that I needed to fill. Would this make sense then? It was up to 15 blues, but maybe I could cut 1 blue Blast to Oblivion, play 2 Sigil of Ethers, and then maybe I put 2 Lightning Press into the main deck?
Yeah, I would do that, yeah. Lightning Press is very good with Blast to Oblivions, and it's also like very, very good card in Oscilio.
Yeah.
I would also like maybe cut like 1 Null Shock to play 3 Press.
And to think I've been keeping Lightning Press in the sideboard. But here we have it. I removed the Lightning Surges, Heaven's Claws, and 1 Null Shock, adding in 2 Blue Blast to Oblivion, 2 Sigil of Ether, and 3 Lightning Presses, giving me a much more streamlined main board. And all that was left to do was to fix up the sideboard, which I already had a couple ideas on. See, I'd been finding 6 defense reactions was a bit too much, so I already knew I wanted to cut Fate Foreseen. This left me with 5 slots, and because I'm a stickler for swapping cards evenly between my main board and sideboard, I bumped Blanche to 3 and added a 3rd Null Rune piece, leaving me with just 1 playset slot left. So one thing I'm thinking is that because there's a couple Sigil of Ether, would putting Glyph Overlay in the sideboard, because I'm thinking Florian might become a bit more popular.
I think you want a couple of big spells in your sideboard. Usually they are Burn Bearers because they are doubling down on poppers as well for Prism, and they're like the best poppers in the game. But for budget reasons, they might not be there. Glyph Overlay is, I think, the best, like the big spell to have.
And there we have it. Thanks to Yuuto's expertise and advice, my clunky 1.3 build had been transformed into this much smoother 1.4 version. It now had more sigil bouncing potential, a bit more arcane damage, a better attack to instant ratio, and a reasonably solid sideboard. And best of all, the price stayed around the same, still meeting my cap of $150. But it wasn't just the deck list that he helped me with, he also had a couple bits of advice for how to approach different matchups.
Usually you have to play like by turn cycles because you need to set up your embodiments or your sigils correctly. Also, like you mentioned, the point of the game where you have to start blocking. That's what I usually like teach people first, is to like to block well in the early game where it like makes sense. Well, value to the life more than the damage, because you just want to get to the Greaves turn. At some point it will happen. Generally, if your opponent is going very fast, you need to match that and it has to be a combo. The flippy part of the deck is that if your opponent is rolling very hot, it's very hard to combat that, because like most deck would just see your opponent going like power turn, they're like, oh, okay, block 12, use my fridge. I will find my turn at some point, but Oscilio has to like kind of no block or block 6 and just keep cycling to find their thing.
While I had certainly learned the hard way that Oscilio was a glass cannon, the advice to treat matchups like a sliding scale was extremely helpful. I hadn't had a chance to play the deck into everything yet, but knowing that I wanted to ramp up the combo digging to match my opponent's speed would at least give me an idea of how to approach the different matchups. And little key pieces of information like this can really make or break games you're unsure of. But with the deck built and Yuuto's advice fresh in my mind, all that was left to do was maybe practice a little more and then take the deck to the Armory. After all, this is a complicated deck, and I certainly didn't want to take like, I don't know, 3 weeks off playing it.
3 weeks later.
This is where I was supposed to sit down and casually explain that I hadn't played for a few weeks, but had a friend coming over to get a couple quick practice games before the Armory that same night. But I forgot to plug in the microphone, so the audio is terrible and I couldn't fix it well enough in post. So instead you get this text-to-speech voice explaining all that. Anyways, I guess I can stop making you look at my offensively shiny forehead and get back to the video.
Thankfully, I hadn't completely forgotten how to play the deck, and after just a couple games, I was feeling pretty confident in my ability to pilot it still. Now, whether or not that confidence was warranted was yet to be seen, but I was confident nonetheless. This new build that Yuuto helped me with was by far better than the previous one, as the deck felt smooth to play instead of clunky with the 2 cards competing for the arsenal slot. But practice means nothing if I can't win any games where it matters. So with nothing else for it, it was time to take this semi-competitive Oscilio budget deck and see if I could take down my Armory with it. And this time, I have a real camera mount, so hopefully my footage won't get botched again. Our armory that night was a bit smaller than I had hoped, but we at least had 5 players, so I was just happy it actually fired. And thankfully, everyone was on different decks, so there was some good variety. There was a Bolton, Pleiades, Verdance, and Syndra, with myself on Oscilio, of course. Out of all these decks, Pleiades was by far the one I wanted to face the least, as I had no way to deal with the disruption, but I wouldn't have to worry about that yet, because my round 1 opponent ended up being... I got the bye.
Oscilio wins!
But with that round 1 win, I checked the pairings only to find out that for round 2, I was indeed facing Preston on Pleiades. Great. This was a deck that wanted to manipulate Auras of Suspense to line up huge disruptive attacks turn after turn. There was a very real chance that this could be a total non-game, but at least her confidence tokens were practically useless considering I can't block for shit anyways. But going into this matchup, I knew that there would need to be at least some defense, so I took out the fries for Sink Below, and away we went. Winning the dice roll, I choose to go first, hoping to chip in some damage since Pleiades likes to set up auras at the start. I play a Sigil of Ether and use a Blast to Oblivion and a Blink to bounce it back, playing it again and keeping a Sink Below for my arsenal. Preston blocks everything and then also draws up, thankfully not playing any auras. On his turn, he plays the Suspense is Killing Me, and thanks to its effect, he's able to send a Thump with its on hit, but I'm able to block it thanks to the Sink Below I'd saved. On my turn, the Sigil of Ether pops, and Preston responds by playing an In the Palm of Your Hands, drawing a card, taking the 1, and giving me an amp. A Fused Entwined Lightning brings him to 35, I discard my Null Shock to draw a card, and then I send in Etchings of Arcana for 4 thanks to the amp off the Sigil. It was here that Preston realized that he should have used his floating resource to stop the Sigil of Ether ping, but he is able to use it here to just take 3 and pass it back. Thanks to Pleiades' counter manipulation, In the Palm of Your Hand pops, and Preston gets to draw another card, and then plays a second The Suspense is Killing Me, and also sends a second Thump, this time for 8. After cycling Electromagnetic Somersault, I block 4 with the Sink Below, take 4, and discard a Sigil of Conductivity. This lets me play an Electrostatic Discharge and a Gone in a Flash for 7 on my turn, getting a Command and Conquer and his Helm on block, leaking 3. I follow that up with a Sigil of Brilliance, allowing me to return the Gone in a Flash so I can arsenal it and pass it back, making me very glad that Preston didn't keep the CNC. His turn starts with an Up on a Pedestal, putting one of his Thumps back on top, and then sends a Cries of Encore for 9, and since he's lower in life, the crowd cheers him. I'm unable to block that much, so I give him my Head and Arms for 2, discarding a Comet Storm to the Flash of Brilliance to bounce back my Sigil of Brilliance and draw a card. I go all the way down to 25, and with no Auras engraved, Preston passes the turn. Now, we're only a few turns in, but this is the crucial pivot point to the entire game, because, if you didn't notice, Preston didn't send any disruption, and after using my headpiece, this left me with 5 cards in hand and a Gone in a Flash in my arsenal, meaning that this was my opportunity to do something that Yuuto had emphasized during our conversation.
Decks in the meta are very hostile, because that's the way you're supposed to play in the Oscilio. Just check with damage, check with disruption. Then when they have like turn off, you do want to combo when you get the chance, right? So if your hand is everything lightning, you can just snap your fingers and then convert that hand into a combo hand.
Well, baby, my opponent just stumbled, and now it's time to cash in. I start my turn with the Sigil of Brilliance, following it with a Blast to Oblivion. Preston plays an Edge of their Seats, declares no blocks, so I use Snappies and a Sigil of Conductivity to bounce the Sigil of Brilliance back to my hand, drawing the card that fully breaks this turn, Blink. Preston takes the 3, and then I play my Gone in a Flash, using Blink to return it to hand and get the action point, bringing him down to 22. I follow that with a Flittering Charge, bringing him to 18, and then I forget to play my Sigil of Brilliance here to give Flittering Charge go again. Now, I didn't catch this until I was rewatching the game, but thankfully the rest of this turn was perfectly legal. I just made the mistake on sequencing. Thinking I'd given Flittering go again, I sent Gone in a Flash after, bringing him to 14. Now, even in the moment, I remember being a bit confused as to how I still had a Sigil of Brilliance in hand, but I didn't clue into the fact that I'm an idiot and forgot to play it on the last chain, so I just play it here, returning Gone in a Flash. Now, even though I messed up, I thankfully didn't cheat an action point that I wasn't supposed to be able to get. The line was supposed to be Flittering Charge, Sigil, Gone in a Flash, then the Shock to return Gone to hand, but I just forgot to play the Sigil on the Flittering Charge chain. And to be fair to myself, we were busy chatting while I was 6 cards deep in a combo with the most complicated deck in CC that I haven't really played in a few weeks, so I hope you can cut me some slack. So if we pretend like I had actually played my Sigil where it was supposed to, I was able to finish off the turn with the Shock for 9, bringing Preston all the way down to 5. and I even get to use the Consign to Cosmos half of the card to banish the In the Palm in Your Hand that he had engraved. But with that slightly scuffed combo turn finished, I pass it back with my Gone in a Flash back in Arsenal and a very comfy life lead. On Preston's turn, he pops 2 of his auras and sends in the Thump he'd previously returned for 11 with confidence. I use a Sink Below to block 4, then go down to 16 and discard a card. Thanks to my Sigil of Brilliance, I'm able to draw an extra card on my turn, and then I'm able to send 8 at him with an Entwined Lightning and a Gone in a Flash, getting 2 cards and his Tunic on blocks. And with the Sigil of Lightning and Conductivity on the field, I actually Arsenal a Blast to Oblivion, keeping the 3-block Gone in a Flash in my hand. Preston uses his last 2 cards to send a Boulder Drop for 7, which I take, bringing me to 8 and putting a card back on top of my deck. As the turn is passed back to me, my Sigil of Lightning pops, and I'm able to abuse my Blast to Oblivion by playing an Electrostatic Discharge to bounce back the Sigil of Conductivity for a second embodiment. This lets me play a Gone in a Flash for 7 with Go again, getting 2 cards and leaking 1. I return it to hand by replaying the Sigil, and with only 1 card left to block with, I'm able to use an Entwined Lightning Fused, followed by the Gone in a Flash to bring Preston to 0, clinching a very quick win.
Oscilio wins.
Alright, well it came with a mistake that I didn't even notice until watching the footage back, but I hope this goes to highlight just how difficult Oscilio can be to play. I'm just glad I only made that small sequencing error and not, cheating an extra action point that I had no way of actually getting. I'm also insanely lucky that I managed to have things line up on turn 4, because if I had waited even a single turn, I likely wouldn't have had another opportunity to combo off. Any deck that's able to chain disruption is very hard for Oscilio to deal with, so you really do need to take full advantage of the rare off turn you'll get. But with round 2 done, I now had 3 potential opponents: Boltyn, Verdance, or Syndra. Out of the 3, I wanted to face Verdance the most, as she was the slowest and would give me the most time to find my combo turn. And unfortunately for me, fate was not on my side, as for round 3, I was paired into Eddie on Syndra. The game plan? Well, I'll let Yuuto explain.
If you play Syndra, you do need to combo to raise them. So then you just dig through your deck as fast as possible to find those.
So, with that advice in mind, I swapped the Sink Belows for Calming Breezes, then we shuffled up and got ready to play. Winning the dice roll, I decided to go second so that I could start the game off on the offensive. Eddie starts with an Oath of Loyalty, and after cycling a card, I block for 3 and am immediately punished by a Throw Dagger. Thankfully, Eddie doesn't draw anything crazy, and after sending a Display Loyalty and flicking a second dagger, he simply pitches to activate Syndra, then arsenals and passes. After only losing 4 life, I take the opportunity to play out a Sigil of Brilliance at the end of his turn, giving myself a 5-card hand. I start with an Electrostatic Discharge and a Flittering Charge for 7, which gets uber blocked, and I actually remember to give it Go again this time with a Lightning Press. I then follow it up by pitching my Blink to send a Comet Storm for 4 and 5, of which 3 gets blocked thanks to Shelter from the Storm and Claw of Vincerakai. But this brings Eddie down to 31 with only 2 cards in his hand. In order to save his turn, he activates his 2 Loyalty Beyond the Graves to draw a card and clearly doesn't get what he wanted. After thinking for a solid minute, he starts his turn with a Blaze Headlong, and since I want to fix my hand a bit, I play out a Sigil of Brilliance, then bounce it back with the Flash of Brilliance. Eddie responds with a Flick Knives, but I have a Calming Breeze in hand to stop it. After pausing for another minute to think, Eddie closes the chain and we clear the board, and I forget to tick my life down by 2. Oh, fuck.
Oh, you cheated.
Okay, listen.
No, he's right. You are a cheater.
Alright, yes. I should have taken 2 here, but there's a couple things I want to say. 1. I have thrown out entire games in past videos with mistakes that impacted the outcome, but as you'll see in a bit, the mistake here doesn't make any difference as the winner of this game still has a decent life lead. And 2. Listen, I swear I don't normally make mistakes back to back like this, but when I'm recording these videos, I'm not only playing the game, but I'm also constantly checking the camera to make sure everything is recording fine. And after having all of my footage completely messed up the last time, I was honestly paying more attention to my camera than I was to the game itself. That said, now that I'm looking like a total asshole in this video, I'm probably going to be triple checking every single thing I do next time to make sure I don't mess up again. But for now, I'll just make sure that the life totals are correct on the overlay. With the turn passing back to me, I play out 2 Sigil of Brilliances, then activate Volzar and send an Etchings of Arcana for 4. Eddie takes it, so I get to return a Sigil of Brilliance to my hand, which I arsenal before passing the turn back. Eddie starts his turn with a Spreading Flames, telling me that this is likely going to be a big damage turn. And honestly, considering I'll be able to draw 2 free cards at the start of my next turn, this couldn't have happened at a better time. I cycle one of my many instants and draw a Gone in a Flash, which is literally the most perfect card I could have gotten. With that in hand, I decide to forego blocking and take the 3, going down to 27 as well. And with the Spreading Flames hitting, Eddie takes the opportunity to crack his mask in order to grab a Blood Runs Deep. His next attack is a Display Loyalty, and after figuring out what I could actually use on my next turn, I decide to block with an Etchings of Arcana, but I do take 1 to Flick Knives. This lets Eddie activate his chess piece, getting the resource to buy back his daggers, which he then follows up with the aforementioned Blood Runs Deep to throw them at me, bringing me to 21. A Hot on their heels that I buffer with my Blade Beckoner Gauntlets brings me to 18, and then a Draconic Salt the Wound, thanks to a fealty, comes in for 6, bringing me all the way down to 12. Now normally, this is where I'd be shitting my pants against Syndra, but in this instance, I'm not too worried. Not only was he left without any daggers on board, but I had a pretty good hand as well, and 2 could play at this combo game. I flash out a Sigil of Lightning at the end of his turn, so when it passes over to me, all my sigils pop and I get an embodiment as well as 2 free cards. I start with a Gone and a Flash for 4 go again, leaking 1, and then play the Sigil of Brilliance from Arsenal to bounce it back. An Entwined Lightning Fused brings Eddie to 22, and then a Gone and a Flash hits for another 4 before I blink it back. Sending Gone and a Flash for yet another 4, Eddie takes it, and I then activate Volzar to shock him for 6 more, getting the Gone and a Flash back once again to park in Arsenal. With Eddie at 8, I pass it back. Eddie starts his turn with a Fealty and an Art of the Dragon Blood for 4, and after cycling a Sigil of Ether, only to draw the second copy, I take it and go to 8 as well. He then returns his daggers, attacking me with the Claw, which I block with my arms, and he then plays a Throw Dagger to flip the Kunai. I go down to 7, and he arsenals and passes with the Spell Void Dagger on board still. Now, remember how I said that the 2 damage I forgot to take earlier didn't matter? Well, that's because my hand is, yet again, absolute fire. Or, I guess I should say lightning, but you know what I'm getting at. At the start of my turn, the Sigil of Brilliance pops to give me a 5th card, and I start with a Flittering Charge, leaking 1 and playing a Sigil of Lightning for the go again. A Blast to Oblivion with the Snappies and the Sigil of Ether bounces the Sigil of Lightning for the embodiment, which lets me follow up with the Gone and a Flash with go again. Now, while I could just pitch the Sigil of Lightning for the Comet Storm in hand, I realized that there was a cooler way to end the game. I play the Sigil, amping 1 more time with Volzar, bouncing back the Gone and a Flash, and then pitch it and activate the old Knocker to send the Comet Storm for 6 and 5, getting me the win with a comfortable 7-point lead.
Oscilio wins.
You know, one day I'll have some normal Armory games for these challenges, but today is certainly not that day. While I was not trying to mess up my sequencing and forgetting to tick down my life, I am glad that it didn't completely ruin the games, otherwise I'd have to wait a whole other week just to try again at the next Armory. In hindsight, I definitely think I should have played the deck more than twice after taking a break before the Armory, considering how difficult it is to play, but what's done is done, and at least the only thing I pulled from the prize gem packs was a foil Loot the Arsenal, a card that I don't even play. So, at least I wasn't rewarded for messing up. While I usually alter my decks just a little bit after a challenge is complete, this time, I think the deck is great as is. And I 100% need to thank Yuuto for helping me bring this budget deck to you all. His advice was incredibly helpful, and I really recommend checking out his channel if you want to play Oscilio. There is an insane amount of value in terms of his expertise and advice, as he really understands his hero better than most. There will be a link in the description to his channel, so if you want to build this deck, make sure you check him out. But that will be all for today. I very much hope you enjoyed, and if you want to help support me in making these videos, consider joining my Patreon or getting yourself a Codex Journal or even some of these fab dice using the links in the description. But with all that said, thank you for watching, and an extra special thanks to all of the Patreons. You guys are the Chadliest of all. Huge shoutouts to the Giga Chads Geeks first, Elixir, Vinny, John, Ty, Chemical, and Dark Memoria. Then we've got the Alpha Chads Thomas, Zajima, Approximo, and Mike, and then there's the Super Chads, Cece, Ben, Yogbadoodles21, Kevin, and Wolf Shadowmancer. Thanks again as always, and stay Chadly, my friends.